Boys and girls of every age, wouldn't you like to see something strange? Come with us and you will see on this fair Decemberween. Yep, the final entry for Kohdokmas is not a game. Hey, I said it was 12 days of Kohdokmas, not 12 games of Kohdokmas, and Christmas is meant to stand out, right? So what we are looking at here is PLASM, and it's exactly what it looks like. A comic book made of trading cards. Wow, you think monetization is out of control now? Imagine having to collect a set of 117 trading cards just to read a comic book. This little idea was the brainchild of Jim Shooter, a pretty controversial figure in the world of comic books. He basically saved Marvel Comics in the early 80s, but wound up overstaying his welcome by adding divisive restrictions to the comic books Marvel produced. He eventually made his own comic book company, Valiant, which also booted him out. So he tried again with Defiant Comics, which barely lasted a year. Probably because a business model of paying tons of money for a random chunk of comic panels was kind of a bad idea. Just saying. So yes, this is PLASM, a comic book made out of trading cards. They are at the very least two-sided, so you technically get 2 panels per card, but the process of building an entire 117-card comic book out of individual cards sold in packs of just 9 is a daunting task. I mean, think about it, each of these packs probably cost as much as an actual comic book. Now, as you can see, these cards are contained in a special PLASM binder, and there were actually 2 versions of this binder released. You could either purchase the binder on its own and store all the cards that you bought piecemeal into it, or you could purchase the collected edition, which has all of the cards already inside of it. And this one is the standalone, with the pricing page and ads still on the back. Whoever owned this book before me spent all that time and money building this comic only for me to pick it up at a used bookstore for 10 bucks. Or they might have purchased the card omnibus tin, I don't know. It's pretty sad. Still, as ludicrous as this idea is, it does beg the question. How is the actual comic? It's actually pretty good. PLASM is the story of Lorca, a man who lives within a huge bioform. This bioform, known as the Org, provides Lorca with basically anything he could want, but in exchange he, and the rest of his people, have to soften up the worlds that the Org consumes to live. Those who live within the Org worship it like a god, believing that becoming one with the Org by being devoured by it and made into something new is essentially immortality. This is, of course, a patently ludicrous idea that devalues life at its basic level, and is used to excuse incredibly savage acts of violence and cruelty, a lifestyle Lorca's friends Ulnarea and Suracine indulge in gleefully. Lorca, despite being one of the more level-headed and honest characters of the group, has never really questioned this system either, thanks to the riches and success he has gotten from it. But this changes once he meets Legion, a woman who was born without authorization. Yeah, it's that kind of society. Legion comes from a small splinter group known as the Monetists, who believe that an individual life exists once and never again, that each person is unique and deserves to live their full life. And as he continues to harvest planets for the Org, poor, honest Lorca starts to think the same way. The two conspire to flee to a planet that the Org could never find, but at Lorca's confirmation of his role as Supreme Inquisitor, the jealous Ulnarea betrays him, capturing and executing Legion in front of Lorca to try to out him and kill his credibility. But Lorca remains unmoved, Ulnarea shocked as his plan backfires. And while Lorca does seem to look upon the sight coldly, we then see him in his bedroom utterly bereft. In his hand, a sample of Legion's hair, more than enough to make a clone of her with the miracles that the Org is capable of, but then those words return to his mind. Once and never again. So now, while he had contemplated escape, only one thing remains for Lorca: revenge. So yeah, PLASM Issue 0 is surprisingly good sci-fi. It's like if the Tyranids assimilated the works of Shakespeare, breaking down concepts of colonialism, imperialism, and their effects on the mind of the individual while setting up a really interesting universe. But then the rest of the series started, and it was just a lame isekai. A bunch of people from Earth end up on the Org, and they get Org powers, and the intrigue plot started with Lorca is just cast aside, and boy is it frustrating! Couldn't we have continued this interesting plot still contained within its own universe, where Lorca works around his former comrades to bring their eventual downfall like a real Richard III or Hamlet type? I was hoping this would progress in the vein of, like, Dune or something, but instead it became a lame series that lasted only 13 issues and bankrupted the company. So, yeah, perhaps a bit of a downer for this year's finale, but I've had this oddity on me since before I started making videos, and was always looking for a reason to show it off. It's such a bizarre artifact from a bygone era, and a learning experience in a world that seems determined to repeat its mistakes. And with that said, I wish you well, a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and good luck on your own future endeavors. But until next year, this is Kohdokmas signing off. A big thanks to our patrons for making this all possible.